Hey everyone, let's kick off today's class. We're on our second lecture, and our topic is all about how artworks come into being. It is the most basic question in the field of art philosophy. Our whole discussion revolves around one main goal: how do we tell the difference between artworks and non-art? And trust me, it's not just some abstract theory, it has practical significance. Actually, every artist answers this question in his artistic practice with each piece he creates. Can I really make an artwork? And how do I make sure it doesn't veer into becoming just another craft? Similarly, in our appreciation of art and reception of artworks, in our so-called general daily artistic life, we are also constantly practicing and grappling with this question, because it is the basic premise that allows all art criticism to occur. The first question in art criticism is the work we are facing a true artwork? Answering this preliminary question becomes the fundamental problem of art philosophy. We can easily distinguish, say, a physics theory, separating it from an essay or a poem, that is a physics theory. But in the realm of art, distinguishing an artwork from a non-artwork is considerably more difficult. It involves the very existence and vitality of art itself, especially in the contemporary era. Our discussion will therefore start from the typical elements that constitute an artwork. First, we must recognize that every artwork is an object, but not every object can be considered an artwork. Is this drinking cup an artwork? Of course, it is an object. So we need to introduce the concept of symbolic meaning. The transformation from physical object to symbolic meaning is what distinguishes an artwork from a practical, utilitarian object. An artwork is not something for concrete use, but rather for contemplation. The object that is contemplated is the physical image. For example, this cup is a physical image. Every object has its own physical form. So when we identify the existence of an artwork, we must recognize the physical image being transformed into symbolic meaning. This concept is necessary. The key factor in this transformation is what we call the artistic form, the artistic expression, or the artistic language. In this transformation, the critical role is played by the artistic language, which is a unique form of expression. What do we call it? A comprehensive statement. This form has traditionally been discussed separately in classical aesthetics as formal beauty. But our more in-depth discussion in art philosophy must overturn the classical aesthetic notion of formal beauty. Beauty does not lie in the form alone. Form is merely a means, a medium. What kind of medium? One that opens up the material. For example, it is only in a true sculptural artwork that we truly see the marble. In our everyday life, we only see marble conceptually, perhaps even mathematically, how much the marble weighs. But in the sculptural artwork, the marble itself is revealed to us. The words of language only retain their full weight as words within a poem. It is in the poem that the external world and our existence are reconnected, named, with the primordial power of sensory naming, the word. Each word only becomes a true word within the poem, otherwise, in an academic essay, it is merely a symbolic representation of a concept. All of this demonstrates that the artistic language plays a critical role. With its form, it opens up the material that would otherwise remain silent, thus enabling the transformation from physical image to symbolic meaning. In Chinese aesthetics, we call symbolic meaning qi yun, which refers to an artwork's charm and vitality. Let's say we both draw a fish. You're the talented artist, while I'm just an amateur. I carefully draw a fish, but it doesn't capture the essence of art. However, if a master like Qi Baishe were to draw a fish, it would exude artistic charm and vitality. That's what we mean by the transition from object to presentation. Now, let's dig deeper into the discussion. A work of art creates its own world, with various symbolic presentations coming together. These presentations form the complete context of the artwork. In bigger artworks, different groups of presentations unite to form the whole piece. But what does it mean for an artwork to be a whole? It's not just the sum of its stories or plot, it's the blending of two tones. The combination of an objective tone and an emotional tone gives birth to subject matter, which is the complete context we often talk about in art. This complete context goes through the process of creation. Since this creation is a comprehensive endeavor, it shapes the completed form. We then revisit the discussion of what constitutes the true content of a work. Where is the true content of a piece? It is not simply what it states, even though many aspects of reality may be present. When we say a work has rich content, it doesn't mean it has a ton of realistic stuff. Take novels, for example. The richness of their content isn't about having a complex plot or a large cast of characters. It's about the range of experiences and depth of inspiration they offer. Like we said before, there's this thing called dual context where the formal context and the thematic context of a work overlap. Let's use Dream of the Red Chamber as an example. It's got elements of reality, so you can see it as a complete encyclopedia of ancient Chinese society. It covers everything from fashion, architecture, poetry, politics, and economics to traditional medicine and cooking. When you dive into the novel, you can explore all these aspects. It's like an encyclopedia. Sure, some people might find some inaccuracies or have different opinions on certain things. But overall, the foundation is solid. For instance, I'm into metaphysics and analyzing birth charts. And guess what? Dream of the Red Chamber even discusses a character's birth chart, specifically Yuan Chun's. It presents the analysis of her birth chart by a fortune teller, and it actually lines up with the principles of metaphysics. It's pretty amazing how Chao Shuoqin was so knowledgeable about so many things. So, when you approach the novel, you can appreciate it from this perspective too. Cooking is such an art, right? Wang Shifeng explained to Grandma Liu how to make the famous dish Qiaxiang. What's your secret technique? I'll try it at home. It's not that hard. Just peel the eggplants you picked and cut the flesh into small cubes. Then fry them in chicken oil. Chicken oil? Are you serious? Yep, chicken oil, chicken oil. Anything else? Add diced chicken breast, fragrant mushrooms, bamboo shoots, and various dried fruits, all cut into small cubes. Everything diced? You got it. Anything else? Simmer it in chicken broth until it's all dried up. The whole chicken? Yep, the whole shebang. And drizzle some sesame oil on top. Lots of sesame oil? Anything else? Mix it with fermented oil. Fermented oil? You bet, fermented. Hey Grandma, don't forget to seal it tightly in a porcelain jar. Seal it? Are you serious? Yep, seal it real tight. Ha ha ha. When you're ready to eat it, just take it out and mix it with some stir-fried chicken bits. Chicken bits? Ha ha ha, oh my Buddha. You need about 10 chickens to go with it. Ha ha ha, unbelievable, no wonder it tastes so good. Ha ha ha. That's hilarious and quite interesting. But does that mean the content of Dream of the Red Chamber is truly rich? We need to rethink how we understand the richness of an artwork. The real richness of the novel lies in how it inspires us, how it portrays the spiritual world, civilization and culture of the Chinese nation, and the fundamental aspects within them. Its characters, their relationships, and their life journeys and final fates of important characters convey its message. So, the complete structure and context it creates is its essence. Understanding the novel is not just about the plot lines and characters, it's about grasping its deeper meaning. That's why we have talked about the idea of thematic context earlier. How does an artist really bring their work to life? Well, artists are inspired by the deep experiences they've had in life, and they just have to find a way to express them. There are different ways to do this, like using theoretical ideas or even religious language, such as how the Chinese use Buddhist concepts to talk about their feelings on destiny. And then there's art. But how do you express these experiences through art? It's not about theories, concepts, or religious, philosophical, or scientific ideas. It's about reliving those original experiences. Our life experiences are real and tangible. Take the poet Xin Qi, 13th century CE, for example. In his later years, he felt the weight of unfulfilled dreams and the resulting sadness. His struggles were real, and he was under a lot of pressure. This kind of sorrow and hardship is something that's deeply felt and can't help but be expressed. And that's how poetry comes to life, because it just has to be written. I brought up this example on page 93 of the Art Philosophy book. If any of you have the book, you can flip to page 93. Just like in the section about the dual context of this work, I talked about reliving the original experience. I mentioned that just sticking to the facts of the subject matter isn't enough to make it a work of art. In other words, reliving the original experience is actually a way of creating art. Check out the last few paragraphs on page 93. Reliving the original experience isn't just a thought, it's still an experience. It's all about tapping into the feelings and reliving the experiences of the characters, which is basically the writer shaping the characters. So, what's this process all about? It's about turning past experiences, real-life experiences, into images. Only by turning these experiences into images can we truly relive the original experience. So, reliving is a powerful force in shaping art. When we think about creating art in a specific field, like painting, we usually think it involves a learning phase, right? Once you've mastered the art, like painting, you've got the skill of composition. But if we just use these learned composition skills to create a painting, it might end up only as a really good sketch, accurately depicting an object or scene. But that's not really creating art, it's just a craft. When an artist uses the form of art to shape images, they're actually reliving their own experiences. This kind of reliving is the driving force behind the artist's composition. It's all about emotion. So, let me give you an example. Xin Qi's Alone in the Wang Hermitage on Boshan is a poem that goes like this. Around the bed, hungry mice roam, bats flutter and dance around the lamp. The pine wind whistles fiercely, rain patters on the roof, and the torn paper window speaks softly. From the northern frontier to the southern rivers I had toiled, spent my life, returning with graying hair and furrowed face. Wrapped in blankets, I wake from a dream on an autumn night, with miles of rivers and mountains still in my eyes. This poem shows us a scene, a complete picture. When we read this poem, of course, we can understand it right away. We can see that the author is expressing his own feelings about life. But if he was just expressing his own feelings about life, he couldn't have written such a poem, if he describes only real, objective experiences. If we were in Xin Qi's shoes, and we had similar feelings about life, how would we turn it into a poem? To turn it into a poem, the motivation comes from our need to relive our own real-life experiences. Reliving these experiences must be done through creating something. So, creating is about building images, and why? Not just to accurately show external scenes, but to express our own experiences. If we're only feeling sorrow, we would only cry. But if we relive this sorrow, we are singing about this sorrow. I use singing as a metaphor. our actual sorrow is transformed into a song about sorrow itself. All artistic creation has to do this. Because of doing this, we must choose the elements of life. For example, the first half of this poem. It talks about mice. Hungry mice roam around his bed, right? And the bat dancing around his lamp. And there's the roof, hearing the wind and rain outside, and the torn paper window. In ancient times windows were pasted with paper, and when it tore, it made a sound, as if speaking. This was the scene he was in at the time. This scene may not be very real. But an artist can create it, shape it. We don't necessarily have to verify it. Did he really stay there? Hey! Did he really stay at the Wang Hermitage on Boshan? It's like someone now wanting to investigate where the Daguan Garden is. It's the same idea. If you treat Dream of the Red Chamber like a history book, you'd have to do some serious fact-checking. But hey, this is a work of art. It's all about creating these vivid scenes. So, how does Xin Qiji's frustration and his sense of loneliness in such a scene get expressed? In the second half, when he says, "From the northern frontier to the southern rivers I had toiled, spent my life returning with graying hair and a furrowed face," he's really pouring out his feelings. Life is so fleeting. In the blink of an eye, you're old, but the dream of bringing peace to the land and reclaiming the country's beauty remains unfulfilled. It's easy to talk about it in concept, but it doesn't hit you in the gut, you know? Because it's not a real reliving of the experience. And then those last two lines, wrapped in blankets, I wake from a dream on an autumn night. He's all wrapped up in a rough blanket, and on this autumn night, he falls asleep and dreams, and when he wakes up from the dream, what's he feeling? Just pure loneliness. Maybe in his dream, he wakes up to the sound of clashing swords and the thundering of horses. It's like living a lonely life in old age. How do you even put that into words? You can't just throw out those concepts, right? Because it's a real reliving of the experience. So, before his eyes, there are rivers and mountains stretching for miles. The thing about poetry is that it's hard to put into words. I feel like, as you get older, maybe in your 40s or 50s, you might really get this poem. Because even though I'm nowhere near as impressive as Xin Qiji, I've had dreams and ambitions that never quite panned out, and as you get older, that feeling of being alone just gets deeper, and you can't really explain it. I've really felt this, going back to the dreams and energy of my youth in a dream, only to wake up and be so old, so incredibly lonely, and desolate. But I can't put it into words. Xin Qiji did. Wrapped in blankets, I wake from a dream on an autumn night, with miles of rivers and mountains still in my eyes. That's art. He's really reliving his own life experiences, and he's turned them into poetry. We can only express our emotions through imagery, and that's how a work really comes together. We're not just copying real life into the work, but rather, we're reliving our life experiences, and only then do they become art. So, when we read Dream of the Red Chamber, we're actually reliving the destiny of Chinese culture, and that's what it's all about. And it's this kind of reliving that really brings the work to life. Each image, each symbolic meaning, and each group of symbolic meanings all come together to form a cohesive whole, the artwork.